Welcome to Part D of our continuing chapter on inventory management. So far we have talked about the economic order quantity model. We've talked about it from the point of view of no price discounts, and we've talked about it from the point of view of with price discount. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the reorder point. So when should we reorder? So our replenishment planning system needs to be able to answer this question as well as how much to order. So this is a timing issue. So the reorder point is defined to be the quantity on hand, or to say it another way, the inventory level. When the inventory drops down to this particular quantity on hand, then that becomes a signal to us to reorder. And the things that basically determine what that reorder point is are shown on this slide here. So how much demand do we have? What is the rate of demand? And the lead time, how long does it take to replenish or to get in a supply? And then the third point is we know that variability always exists. So how much variability is there in the rate of demand and also in the lead time? And then finally, the last thing is from a risk perspective, how much risk are we willing to take that we run out of inventory before we get a resupply, which means that we could have a stock out. That is, we don't have any inventory when a customer wants to buy it. So, having said that, let's see the reorder point from a graphical point of view. So this is our basic economic order quantity model here. So we've seen this before. So we start out at some period of time with a certain quantity, and we're assuming we have a constant demand or a constant usage rate. So demand starts to decrease, and then at some point the inventory reaches a point where we say it's time to order, and that is the reorder point. We can see that over on the vertical axis, the reorder point. So that's when we're going to place the order. And hopefully by the time we receive the order in, our inventory has not run out, and then our inventory will go back up. Now, to give you a little practical example of this in my house, in our master bedroom, my wife and I both have our own walk-in closets. And for some reason that I've never understood, it's just one of those husband things that you just accept it, that the toilet paper for the master bathroom is kept in my closet. So every day when I get up to go dress for the day, I have the ability to observe how many rolls of toilet paper that we have in my closet. So when I observe that the inventory or the stock balance of the rolls gets down to a certain point, I mention to my wife that we have reached a reorder point on inventory for the toilet paper, which means that the next time someone goes to the grocery store, we should replenish that particular item. So that's intended to be a little example of reorder point in our daily life. So reorder point is something that's calculated, and the formula for the calculation is shown here. Now, this is when our demand rate is reasonably constant and reasonably certain, so we feel pretty good that the demand rate is going to be this, and also the lead time is fairly reliable. So the reorder point is equal to the demand rate times the lead time. And of course, the demand rate and the lead time, is very important that each of these be in the same time unit of measure. So a simple example of calculating the reorder point is shown in the bottom of this slide. So let's say that I have a reliable demand rate of 50 per day, and it takes me 2 days to get in a resupply of this item from my supplier. So my reorder point is going to be 50 times 2, the demand rate times the lead time, or 100, which means that when the inventory level reaches 100, then it is time to send an order to my supplier to replenish. Now notice that the reorder point has nothing to do with the quantity that I'm going to order from my supplier. It's just saying when the inventory reaches this point, that's when I'm going to order. The quantity that I'm going to order is going to be determined by the economic order quantity or some other method that I use. So if we take a look at this slide here, now let's talk about the possibility of uncertainties. So if we take a look at our theoretical economic order quantity model again, we can see that this slide shows the demand rate, instead of it being a straight line, is a little curvy line, which means that the demand is not perfectly constant. So there is a point when we reorder, when the inventory reaches this level, when we are at our maximum vulnerability. So we placed an order with the supplier, and we're just at a risk of, if the demand increases, which is shown in this slide as the dotted line, if it increases, the slope of that line changes, there's a possibility that we're going to run out before we get in that resupply. There's another risk that could occur that's related to the lead time. So the supplier who is providing this, what if the lead time were to suddenly increase? So that is another risk that could occur. So if either one of those two risks occur, that demand increases while we have placed the order and we're waiting for the resupply, or the lead time increases, then there's a possibility that we are going to run out. So in order to protect us against one or both of these possibilities, we may want to consider carrying some safety stock. So now we'll talk a little bit about this concept of safety stock. So the formula for reorder point under consideration is going to need to be modified a little bit. So if we have certain uncertainties either in demand or lead time, then the reorder point calculation would be that the demand times the lead time, and then I'm just going to add a safety stock on the back end of it. So safety stock is defined to be an additional amount of inventory that I voluntarily choose to carry to protect myself against the uncertainties of demand and lead time. So in calculating or determining the amount of safety stock to carry, again, this is a voluntary activity, okay? The reason why we do this, of course, is to improve our customer service level. If we have an item that we perhaps have a very high profit in, we certainly want to maximize our revenue and maximize our profit. So if we run out of inventory and customers want to buy, then we have a very significant opportunity loss in both revenue and profit. But the two methods of determining safety stock would be to define some fixed amount that you wish to carry, some specific quantity that you might want to determine arbitrarily or maybe through some type of spreadsheet calculation. The second method is by using the concept of service level. So the definition of service level is this: it is the probability that demand will not exceed your supply during the lead time. So service level can be calculated, and it is the 100% minus a stock out risk. So if I wanted to have let's say I'm willing to carry a 20% stock out risk, then my service level would be 80%, 100 times 20%. So what that means is that I am wanting to have a probability that I will not run out of inventory. I want that to be 80%, 80%. Now, let's go into our case study and try to apply this concept of safety stock there. So, for the three ingredients in our pizzas, crust, pepperoni, and mozzarella cheese, Zzz's wants to keep some safety stock as a precaution to make sure that we don't run out. So we want to calculate what the reorder point will be, including the safety stock for these three ingredients. So the table below shows the safety stock that we want to carry. So in this example here, we're using a fixed safety stock where we're determining a specific quantity. We have the lead time for each of the ingredients, and we have the average daily demand for each ingredient. So to calculate what the reorder point for each of those ingredients will be, we're going to use the formula that the reorder point is equal to the demand times the lead time, and then we're just going to add the safety stock on the back end. So for the crust, we have a demand of 20 pounds per day, a lead time of 2 days, so that's 40 pounds, and then we're going to add 25 safety stock on the back end of that, and that will give us a reorder point of 65 pounds. So when the inventory reaches 65 pounds, that's when we're going to reorder. And the same calculations are done for the pepperoni and the cheese that are shown here. So make sure that you go through this and you understand how we have arrived at the reorder points for all three elements. Now, the other method of determining safety stock is to use the concept of service level. So in this example, the safety stock is not a fixed value, but is determined by statistics. So the safety stock is going to be a variable z, which represents the number of standard deviations or the distance away from the mean. We're assuming that our demand or our lead time is normally distributed. And the sigma is the standard deviation of the lead time demand. So let's see how this can be applied. So here's our formula for reorder point using the service level. So we see that the reorder point, the demand times the lead time, that's exactly the same thing as we've been doing before. And then plus, now we've got our z, our standard deviation or distance from the standard deviation of the demand, and then the square root of the lead time. So z sigma square root of lead time is essentially the safety stock that we're adding to the demand times the lead time. So let's see how this plays out. Go and look at the case study. So in this example here, we have another ingredient, sausage, and it has an average daily demand of about 15 pounds. And the replenishment lead time is 5 days. Now, the supplier for this ingredient is not always reliable. And the data has shown that the standard deviation for demand during the lead time is 3 pounds. Okay, so in other words, the demand is not always 15 pounds a day. Sometimes it could be more than 15 pounds. Sometimes it could be less than 15 pounds. The standard deviation away from the mean is 3 pounds. So I'd like to have a safety service level of 95%. In other words, I want to have a probability that I will not run out of inventory to be 95%. So how much safety stock would I need to carry if I wanted to have a 95% service level? So the safety stock is shown in this formula here. So it is the Z value that is represented by 95% times the standard deviation of the demand and then the square root of the lead time. Now there's a table in your textbook in this chapter where we can look up for different service levels what the Z value is. So from that table in your textbook, I would go down to 95%, read over to the column that represents the Z value, the distance, 1.64. So what that basically means is that I want to have a standard deviation of 1.64 standard deviation. The standard deviation of the lead time is 3 days. The lead time is 5 days. So the calculation of the lead time is shown here. So the square root of 5 is 2.2. Put this into the formula. So this gives me a safety stock of about 10.8, or rounding it up to 11 days. Now this is the formula if the uncertainty is with respect to lead time. Now we're not going to go through an example of this, but it's essentially the same concept. So again, there's 2 risks associated with from the time that we place an order. One risk is with demand changing, and the other risk is with lead time being uncertain. Now we'll finish up this part of the chapter by discussing the concept of a single period model. So in most cases, when we're ordering an item from a supplier, we can order any time that we want to, and we can, of course, order the quantity that we want to. But in certain types of materials, we really only have one opportunity to purchase an item, and we refer to that as a single period model. So this is applicable when the things that we are ordering are perishable, that the value of them decreases in time. Now let me give you an example of an item whose value decreases in time, and that is newspapers. So there's still, even though we live in an electronic world, we still have paper newspapers, and you can go and you can purchase a copy of the daily newspaper from a vending stand. So the person who is ordering those papers, the question is, how many papers do I want to order that one day? Because the value of that paper is only good for one day. No one wants to buy a newspaper that is 1 day old or 2 days old or whatever. A newspaper is only valuable for the current day, the current news. So the question is, how much should I buy for that one day, knowing that after that day I'm going to have to essentially throw those papers away because I can't sell them because there's no value associated with that. This concept also applies to a lot of other things too. So in grocery stores, there are items that are perishable. They go bad. So flowers, for example, after a certain period of time, the flowers wilt. You can't sell them. So in this example here, there are a couple of costs that are taken into consideration. The first is referred to as the shortage cost. So this is if I purchase this perishable item, let's say newspapers, for example, and I don't buy enough. And so I run out of newspapers, and then I have people who want to buy a newspaper, and I don't have any. That's referred to as a shortage cost. So it is an unrealized revenue or profit. The other cost is a excess cost. So if I buy too many newspapers, and at the end of the day, I still have an inventory of newspapers left over. So I'm going to have to throw those newspapers away, but I had to spend money to pay for them, so there is a cost associated with throwing them away. So the shortage cost is the revenue that I would have received if I had sold that, minus the cost that I paid for that. The excess cost is the cost that I paid minus the salvage value. So in some cases, there could be something that has a salvage value. So I can't sell it for the same price as if it was fresh, but I can get something for it. An example of an item that has a salvage value associated with that would be donuts. In certain bakeries, there are available for customers donuts that were made the day before, day-old donut. And day-old donuts you can buy for a much reduced price than the donuts that were made that day. I can tell you this, you can buy day-old donuts, pop them in a microwave for a few seconds, and they taste like they just came out of the oven. So there is a salvage value associated with certain things. So question is, what is the optimum service level? In other words, what is the optimum probability that I want to have that takes into consideration of not running out, that takes into consideration these two costs, the shortage cost and the excess cost. So the formula for the service level is shown here. It is the ratio of the shortage cost divided by the sum of the shortage and the excess cost. So let's take a look at our case study. So ZZ's wants to carry a supply of the Dallas Morning News so that customers could read the newspaper while they're enjoying their pizza buffet. And they're not going to carry the Sunday edition of the Dallas Morning News because the Sunday edition is considerably more expensive and they do not want to take the risk of having an excess cost. So the information on the 6-day-a-week paper, Monday through Saturday, is shown in the table below. So the selling price, they sell it for 75 cents. It costs them 15 cents to buy the newspaper from the Dallas Morning News. And the average daily demand, so they have always sold at least 10 newspapers per day. So that was the minimum number that they have sold every day. So we can guarantee that we'll sell at least 10. And the most we've ever sold in any one day is 25. And the salvage value for these newspapers is 0. So after that particular day, we're going to have to throw those papers in the recycle bin. So the question is, what should be the service level, the optimum service level that we should try to attain for this set of data, and also how many newspapers should we buy each day? So we first have to calculate the shortage cost. So the shortage cost is the revenue that we receive when we sell a paper minus our cost. So we sell it for 75 cents and it costs us 15 cents, so we have a shortage cost of 65 cents. So what that means is that if we ran out of papers and we had someone who wants to buy us, essentially our loss would be that should be 0.65, not 65, not $65 as a mistake on this slide. It should be 65 cents. Okay. The excess cost is the cost per unit minus the salvage value. So the calculations here, the salvage value is 0, and the excess is 15 cents. So if I have to put them in the recycle bin, it costs me 15 cents. So the question is, what is the optimum service level? So the optimum service level, so plugging in the shortage and excess costs into the formula here and doing the calculation, the optimum service level is 87%. That is, we should have a probability of 87% that we will not run out of newspapers. So now the question is, how many newspapers should we buy that will give us this service level of 87%? So to do that calculation, the formula is the minimum demand that we can pretty much guarantee on plus our optimum service level times the difference between the maximum demand we've ever had minus the minimum demand. So substituting the values in this formula, the minimum demand that we could always guarantee on is 10. Our service level is 87% or 0.87. The maximum that we have ever sold is 25 papers, and so this calculation says that we would order 23, or can't order a fraction of a paper, 24 newspapers. So this is an application of the single period model to our case study. This concludes part D of this chapter, and there's one more part that you need to be able to do, so make sure that you view that as well.